Hi everyone. Today I want to share with you my story about how I came to discover Innerdance. For those of you that know me quite well, you will know that I love to tell long, intricate stories, and this story is actually quite an intricate, long one. It's almost like Innerdance had been calling me for quite a long time, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time in a way that I wasn't expecting. It was the last thing in the world that I expected. And I want to tell my story because it's an amazing story, and a story about trust and about synchronicities and about divine timing. So it started about a year before. I was going through quite a difficult time in my life. I was at a crossroads. I was not well on so many levels. I actually was having like a bit of a crisis. And I've been living in a beautiful home for quite a few years, and things started going wrong in my life. Everything just seemed to be going wrong. And I remember that I spent some time in silence. I went into quite a bit of silence, and in one of the moments I got this very, very strong message that I needed to go to Asia. Asia was calling me so strongly, and it was so bizarre because even though I've been on the spiritual path for a long time, for whatever reason I'd never ever felt drawn to going to Asia before. Never occurred to me, but it was so strong. And there were a few places that ended up calling me. For many years I had been facilitating classes called the Journey Through Dance, and something just said to me that I needed to offer my Journey Through Dance class at some point on my trip to Asia. And I think already by then the Philippines had called me, because there were a few places in Asia that I was guided to go. I'd never thought about the Philippines in my life, but it was one of the places that was calling me. And so I started to Google a few places, and I discovered this eco type of resort place in the Philippines. I think already by then the Philippines had called me, because there were a few places in Asia that I was guided to go. I'd never thought about the Philippines in my life, but it was one of the places that was calling me. And so I started to Google a few places, and I discovered this eco type of resort place in the Philippines that spoke to me. And I contacted them, and I said to them, look, I'm coming to the Philippines, and I'd love to facilitate a Journey Through Dance class. And they actually said to me, you can come here, you can stay here for free in exchange for teaching classes. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So my trip to the Philippines was actually guided by that. So I went to the island where that place was situated in. So I had planned that, and the Philippines was actually the last stop on my journey. I went to Asia for 3 months. I went to Japan, Taiwan, China, and then ending in the Philippines. So when I arrived in the Philippines, I went to this place called Bahe Kalape, and I taught one of my classes there. It was actually quite a quiet time of the year. There weren't that many tourists there, but there were many teachers there, and there were actually quite a few teachers that ended up doing my class. And it just so happened that on the second day that I was there, because I was only there for about 3 days, there was this modality called Innerdance, and someone was facilitating a class. I had never heard of Innerdance. And when I attended my first Innerdance class, I was totally wowed, because I was like, this is a conscious dance practice, but we're lying down. Never ever heard of that before. That's completely bizarre. So they told me to lie down, and the facilitator, her name was Tadea, she didn't really give much information about what was going to go down, and I had no clue what I was in for. So I lay down and she started to play this music. And I remember my first Innerdance quite well. I had so many visions. It was quite colorful. I had colorful visions, and my body was moving a lot. It was like the dancer waking up from inside, but it was so different, and so it was different to what I had experienced before. But actually, when I came to think about it, and subsequently afterwards came to think about, I'd actually already been experiencing Innerdance a lot in my own personal private space at home. It was familiar, yet it was the first time that I'd had a facilitator facilitate it. And it felt like it was very surreal experience, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I left this island called Porto Princesa, and I traveled to another island 6 hours from there. I had left Baja Calipe. You know, I experienced Innerdance, but I never thought much of it. I was like, wow, like that was interesting. You know, it never really occurred to me, or it was just like, okay, that was an interesting experience. And I made my way to this other island in the north. And this is actually quite interesting because I booked to do some scuba diving. I'd never done scuba diving in my life, and while I was in this island, I attempted to take part in a scuba diving course. And to cut a very, very long story short, on my second day of my scuba diving course, where my instructor was attempting to, we were in the water, and she was attempting to take me through the process of being under the water, and now we're actually going to be diving. She taught me the first exercise, and I went into a lot of fear. I'd already known going into this that I have fear around the ocean, and I felt like the scuba diving was going to support me to shift something, to break through that fear. And I think what was so traumatic about this whole experience is that I had been thinking about this for months. I'd been thinking about this scuba diving course, and this idea about swimming with the fishes. I'd almost worked it up in my imagination so much that it was quite heartbreaking what came next, because I was in the water. I really wanted to push through. This anxiety kept coming up. I felt deeply fearful, and it was completely illogical because she just was getting me to do the most simplest exercise, but I couldn't do it. And she could see that I was in a lot of fear, and she said to me, look, she said, just take a few minutes to just think about this, think about if you want to do this. And I was feeling very emotional, and I closed my eyes, and I asked for my higher self, my higher guidance, to please help me to make this decision. And I received 2 messages. The one was, I saw this really big cross in front of me, and the message that came was, do not go here, do not go through this door. And as I saw that, I received another message that said, if you dive today, you will die. And in that moment, I had to trust that, because it felt very, very real. Whether it was not real, in that moment, it felt very, very, very real. And I looked at my instructor and I said to him, I'm sorry, but I can't do this. And I basically completely broke down. I completely broke down, and I started to cry immensely. And it was such an emotional, it was a very emotional moment for me. It was my entire time in Asia, I'd been, like, together. I never had any like real triggers, like big massive triggers and trauma. This was a big moment of trauma for me, and I was just crying. And this part of the story is quite interesting, and I want to share it because it was such a beautiful moment for me. So I was on a boat right then and then with another, I think it was a couple, and they were also with another diving instructor. It was myself and my diving instructor, and what happens in this island is that you hire out these boats for the day, and they take you to these islands to go and dive and and all that. And so I actually had paid to be on this boat, and I was with them now for the day. And so after this big cry, the other couple and the other diver wanted to go and do another dive. So they said to me, look, we're going to drop you on this island, this beautiful island. You can just lie on the beach here and relax while we go, are we going to go like around the corner over here and dive? And actually in that moment, I was so grateful to have that time on my own, because I was in a lot of trauma. I was shaking, I was emotional, I was in a lot of fear. And I was finally alone, and I could just be by myself. So I was on this beautiful beach, and and I felt like I needed help, and I didn't know what to do. And something just said to me, there's a woman that I know very well. She's a healer. She lives in Johannesburg, here in South Africa. And something just said to me, message her. And I remember sending her a text. I don't think I spoke or said very much, but I just said to her, look, I'm in a lot of trauma. I don't know what to do. I feel overwhelmed. And she just said to me, lie down on your stomach on the sand and give it all to the mother. And that's what I did. And I just lay down on my stomach, and I just cried. I just cried and I cried, and I gave it all to Mother Earth. And I actually fell asleep. And when I woke up, something happened that, I don't think anything that like that has ever happened to me in my life. I was obviously lying down, and I lifted up my head, and I looked in front of me, and I honestly thought that I was tripping, because what I saw, I just couldn't comprehend. I'd never heard of it. I've never seen it. I didn't think. It looked like a creature that would have lived in the time of the dinosaurs. And I honestly thought that I was maybe hallucinating. I couldn't comprehend. This creature was very, very close to me. It was probably the size, I don't know, like about this high. It looked like a dinosaur, but I actually didn't know what it was. I found out later on what it was, but I was, and it just looked at me straight in the eye. I wasn't afraid. I remember not being afraid, but I was like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. It was just something I couldn't comprehend. It looked at me, and it crawled back into the jungle behind the island. I found out later on that it was a monitor lizard, and this one that I saw was a huge one, absolutely huge, and it was really so special, and I felt like it was some type of a gift. It was a real big blessing to be able to see a creature like that. I found out also that those things can kill you quite easily, but at that moment I wasn't afraid. I felt like sharing that because it was a very special moment for me, and something that I will never ever forget. So I was, even though I had that release, and I was feeling I was at some type of peace to some degree. I was unsettled, and there was a little voice, because basically in that moment, on that day, I had about 4 to 5 days left. I don't even think that long. I think 3 days left until I was going back to Cape Town. And there was a voice that was like, you need to extend your trip. You're not ready to go home. But I was in such a mess. I was confused, and also I didn't want to leave my trip being in that space. I was all over the place. I was not feeling well. I was not very grounded. I felt confused. And there was this tiny little voice, and I asked for a sign, because I was like, I've got like 48 hours to make this decision, because I've got to fly back to Manila to book my flight back to Cape Town. And I think it was that same day or the following day, I was on the beach, and I was at this beach bar having some lunch, and there was a guy that was sitting next to me that started to talk to me. And this guy, he was a travel blog writer, and he asked me who I was and what am I doing and where am I going. And I said, oh, I've been traveling, and I'm actually going back to Cape Town in 2 days' time. And he was like, no, he says, there's still so many islands to see, and you can go to this island and that island, and you can go to Thailand. And we were talking for almost an hour, and there was something in this conversation. There was something in the conversation. I just knew that this was my sign. I just knew. And so I went back to my room, got the number for Emirates, called Emirates, and extended my flight by 2 weeks. And I had absolutely no idea why. No idea where I was going to go. And that was actually the first time in my life that I had ever done something like that. I'm a planner. I always know what I'm doing. I always know where I'm going, but that was the first time in my life that I actually extended a flight 2 weeks, no idea why, and it was an open field. 40 minutes after that phone call to Emirates, I got violently sick. So I remember it was actually a pancake that I'd eaten. But I believe if I look at the full picture of this, there was a higher power involved in this. I got so sick. I don't think I've ever been sick like that in my life. I literally was in my hotel throwing up for 3 days. 3 days solid. I was throwing up. I was so nauseous. I was so sick. I thought I was dying. And I had extended this flight, and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? Why am I sick? It was absolutely awful. And all I wanted to do was get out of this island, because I felt like there was something about the island. I wanted to get out of the island, and I was scared to get out of the island, because the bus ride, the 6-hour bus ride from where I was, which was El Nido, back to Puerto Princesa, which was where because so a Puerto Princesa is where the Abaje Calape was, and that's where the airport is. So I am, and that particular ride, that bus ride that goes down, is so nauseating. There are so many turns, and it's the most uncomfortable. It was probably the most uncomfortable ride I've ever done in my life, and I am nauseous, and I am not feeling well, and so I had to wait, and so I had to wait. So I took the bus ride, went back to Puerto Princesa, and I booked myself a very cheap little hostel, and I just lay in bed recovering. And I was lying there, and I was thinking, what am I going to do now? Like, where am I going to go? Looking at the Filipino map, and thinking, should I go to Thailand? And just not really knowing what to do. And something said then I had another feeling. And the feeling was, Leigh, you're a mess. You're a mess. I think you need some energy healing work. Find someone that can do some energy healing work on you. And that just felt so right. I was like, you know what? This is what I need. I need someone to help me release. I felt like not great. And I decided to contact Baja Calipe, the retreat center where I taught my Journey Through Dance class. I decided to contact them, and I sent them a mail. And I said to them, look, do you know anyone that can do some energy healing work on me? And they replied straight away, and they actually said to me, oh yes, there's a lady here named by the name of Jana. She can do a healing session on you. And I just thought, this is so bizarre, because I connected with Jana on the last day that I was there. I had her number in my phone. I already had her number in my phone. And so I sent her a message, and I was like, hey Jana, I'm really not doing well. I'm back in Puerto Princesa, and I could really do with some energy healing. And she said to me, Leigh, meet me at the coffee shop. And we met at the coffee shop, and yeah, I had this amazing conversation with her. And she then later on in the day at Baja Calipe did this energy healing session on me, and that was, I think, a Thursday. And at the end of the healing session, she said to me, Leigh, she says, but aren't you here for the Innerdance Energy School? And I was like, what's that? Never heard of it. She's like, Leigh, I think that you're here because of that. And she subsequently then told me, she started to talk about this man called Pi. And she was shocked that I had never heard of Pi. She was totally shocked. She's like, you don't know who Pi is? And I'm like, never heard of him. So that night, went onto Google and I checked out this guy Pi. And as I see his face, I'm like, something about this man. And it was so interesting because there was nowhere else for me to go. I had no calling to go anywhere else. And Jana had said to me that day to come back. She told me to come back the next day because someone was facilitating an inner dance there at the retreat center, and she really felt that I should participate because it will help me to just release a little bit more. So I went back the next day and met some people that I had previously met when I was there before. And again, there were so many signs. People were like, oh, you're here for the Innerdance Energy School. And I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know why I'm here. And there were loads of signs. There were so many signs. It was actually screaming in my face, and it was so obvious. And they accommodated me. I was able to stay at the retreat center with the rest of the group, and I just, something in me just knew that this is something that I have to do, not really even knowing why, but I just trusted. And I remember the first day of the Innerdance Energy School, it was before it started, and I was sort of outside the building, and I recognized Pi. He actually walked towards me, and he looked at me and he said to me, and who are you? And I said, I'm Leigh. He's like, he says, I heard about you. He says, I'm glad there's someone here that is representing Africa. And didn't really understand what he meant at the time, but he's got a strong connection with Africa, and Innerdance has got a strong connection with Africa. And I understand that now. At the time, I didn't really understand it, but he was very serious when he said that to me. He was like, yeah. He's like, it's good that, it's great that you are here. This particular energy school was actually, which I didn't know, and I only found out that weekend. And this was actually one of the most important energy schools that Pi had ever facilitated. And at the time, Pi had made this decision that this was going to be his last energy school that he was ever going to teach. That didn't end up being the truth, because he has facilitated one since. But at the time, he had made a decision this was going to be the last energy school that he would ever facilitate. And so, there's a nice loud helicopter here. And so, people from all over the world came to this energy school. And there were about 30 of us, 35 of us, and I just happened to be in the island, in this place at the right time. And it was just incredible how I actually got there, and how grateful I am for it. It was a beautiful experience, a lot of healing, a lot of release, a lot of awakening. I had a really profound experience, but never in a million years did I ever actually think that I would be an Innerdance teacher. That never occurred to me. I thought that I was just having an experience. You know, it was quite wild. The whole thing was quite wild. It was the healings that happened, the awakenings that happened, the sharings, it was so beautiful. All of it was so special. The food, eating raw food for 5 days, it was such a magical experience. And on the last day, Pi said to all of us, go out there and teach this. And I remember thinking, how on earth would I teach this? Like, I wouldn't even know where to start. And so on the final day, I was having a chat with Serena. Serena is one of Pi's incredible teachers that he works with, and she's an incredible Innerdance facilitator. And on the last day, her and I were having a conversation, and she said to me, you know, Leigh, there's another girl that has also been here in the Philippines. She lives in South Africa somewhere. She's not sure where she lives, but she's also done this training, and maybe you can, you know, connect up with her. And I put her name on my phone. And when I got back to Cape Town, life happened, things happened. It was definitely not the first thing that I was thinking about. Like, I wouldn't even, at the time, I had no concept of how on earth I would offer Innerdance as a modality. So a few months later, something very amazing happened, and this comes to how this all got started. So a few months later, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and it was he was actually working at a studio space that I was actually renting out at the time for some of my classes. And we were having a conversation, and he wanted to hear about my trip to Asia. And I was talking to him about all the things that I did and all that. And at some point I said, oh, you know, I was in the Philippines, and I just like happened to say to him, oh, and I learned this really interesting and beautiful modality called Innerdance. And he said to me, Innerdance? He said, that's interesting. He said, there's a girl, he said, that does singing bowls in the studio, and he is positive that she also knows this modality called Innerdance, that she like, you know, that she offers it. And I'm like, no, it can't be. I said, you know, he said, no, he's sure that this girl does Innerdance. And I said, okay, it's bizarre. And he said that he will tell her about me, and he'll give her my number. The following day, I get like an 8-9 minute voice note. And this moment was so super surreal. It was so surreal. I get this long voice note and I'm looking at this and I'm very confused. I'm actually quite confused. And looking at this, and this voice note starts, and this girl is like, oh my God, you went to the Philippines and you went to buy a color pay and you met Pi and Serena, and oh my God, I know all these people, and you know Innerdance. And she was so excited. But what was really, really confusing for me about this whole voice note was that I had her number on my phone saved as Sharon, and in brackets Andreas's friend. And I'm trying to now think, how on earth has this happened? And then I realized that Andreas, who's a really good friend of mine, had told me about this girl Sharon about 2 years before, and said to me, I think that you should connect with this girl for whatever reason. I can't even remember why, but I had her number saved on my phone. And so Sharon and I met up, we connected, and we started Innerdance classes together. That's how my journey started, and so divinely guided, so incredibly blessed. And I'm so grateful to Sharon because she was a huge catalyst for me. She had already been facilitating a few classes in Cape Town to close friends of hers, and she helped me to get on the path. And her and I, we've done some incredible work together, offered our own Innerdance energy schools here in Cape Town. And I'm looking forward to continuing this journey, offering more, and sharing this sharing this incredible modality with the world. Thank you for listening to my story. It's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to share it, because I love how life, if you can follow the signs, and if you trust, and if you listen, and you're in tune, how you are always divinely guided.